I've read the book of Job so many times, but this morning it is wrecking me. There's a lot about Job that I don't understand. But I mean, heck, there's a lot about my life I don't understand. You're gonna have to go read the whole story about how he got to this point, but he lost everything, and now he's lost his health. And in chapter 3, it says Job laments his birth. And like in the first couple of verses, we see the deep depression that Job got in. And I immediately thought about the times in my life where I've been caught up in such a deep depression. And so many Christian friends trying to help would say, like, you just need to give it to God. You just need to give it to God. And like, I wanted to scream and be like, I'm trying to give it to God, but like, he's not responding. And that's exactly what happened to Job. So I want to read you this, because this was like, all I can write was, I've been there. Job 3:20 says, why is the light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, but it comes not, and dig it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave? Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For my sighing comes instead of my bread, and my groanings are poured out like water. For the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. Job is saying, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, curse the day that I was born. Why did God even let that happen? Like, I would rather not even be here at all than have to go through this. He lost everything that he owned. He lost his children. The only person that he had left was his wife and his friends, who constantly told him that he must be a sinful man and that he needed to curse God and die. But in chapter 2, verse 6, we see why that didn't happen. It is because the Lord responded to Satan and said, behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. And so long in my life, I've looked at that verse as being like, okay, God still has ultimate control. No matter what the enemy has power over, God is still in control when you belong to him. But then I read this study note, and it said, for Job's faith to be truly tested, his life must be spared. He must be denied the mercy of death. Because at this point in Job's life, once he's lost everything except for a wife who's telling him to curse God and die, and his health now, it would be merciful for him to die, to not have to experience the pain that he's gone through. Like, I cannot relate to everything that Job has lost at all. But there have been multiple times in my life through different seasons where I was like, okay, God, I'm done. I am D-U-N. I am done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather just be with you. Like, can't you just take me on to heaven? This is too hard. I don't know, I've read this so many times, but in a way this morning, I just like completely identify with his pain. But it's also interesting that Job didn't take matters into his own hand in his own life. Like, he had so many questions about why God was allowing him to go through this, and why he was having to face all of this when he loved God and he wouldn't sin and curse God with his lips. But there still had to be that mustard seed faith that God was who he says he was, because Job didn't try to take matters into his own hand. And I don't know if you know the end of the story, but in the end, God actually blesses Job and gives him more than he had to begin with. But can I tell you something? That's not always the case. But Job had peace and comfort in who God was before God blessed him with all of the extra stuff. And that's the thing. That's the thing that you strive for. When God finally answered Job, it was comfort that he gave him. That meant more than anything else. Comfort to know that God did not leave him. He was still there. He was still there, and he was watching over Job's life, and all of this had a purpose. Like, God is still working it for good today through his word, through scripture. Job's testimony is still being worked for good today. But I bet in chapter 3, Job had no idea the impact that his testimony would have on the world. And it's not about him, it's about God. So here's the deal. God's not done because your situation feels hopeless. If you're in chapter 3 of Job's story, if you feel like that, why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter in soul? I can tell you that comfort's coming. You just have to keep seeking God. And it may not be the comfort through the blessings, but the comfort that he is with you through whatever you have to go through. Because I can tell you, one thing that comes to mind is when I lost my child in July of 2021. I still think about that every single day. Every time Pearson asked me, Mama, when am I going to have a brother or sister? And that's just the tip of the iceberg of my story. But even though God hasn't answered the prayer to bless and replace, it doesn't mean that he hasn't replenished my soul, because he has. And I have comfort to know that God sees me. He sees me in my mourning. He sees me in these depressive states where you just feel like I can't do it anymore. He is such a good God. He is such a good God. Chapter 3 is not the end of your story. I promise you, it's not the end of your story. I just flipped over to the book of Psalm, and I want to read this to you. Psalm 56, verse 3 and 4 says, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you, in God whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me?" I promise you that God has got you. I promise you that he does. It may not seem like it right now, and the enemy may be attacking you on every single side like he was Job, but God has not left you. He promises he will not leave us or forsake us, and you can take that to the bank, friend. Whatever you're going through, whatever chapter 3 you're in right now, guess what? God has got a chapter 42 for you. It may not be financially blessings, it may not be this huge prosperous life, but it is the comfort that only he can give as the God who created you for a purpose.